Really, really low though. So, let's do it. So our first question is as follows. Is there anything for PvP and any good balance changes? So in terms of PvP, there is going to be a new skill line with the Psionic Order. And with that skill line, more importantly, there's going to be passives as well. So this is a question I was asked by my Discord to ask the streamers. Sorry, to ask the developers. That will obviously come with a passive. Now, one of those passives is going to... Damn it. One of those passives is going to influence quite heavily in the way the PvP plays. So it's going to be giving basically damage to your light and heavies on execute. Why that affects PvP? I want you to work out what class might like an execute at low health. So that's another interesting one there. Outside of that, there's no instant developments to PvP, but there is obviously that new skill line to work with, and I do know a fair bit about the skills directly to work with as well. Mike, thank you so much for gifting that sub, dude. Very, very good of you. Will there be any new class or race? So there is no new class or new race. I did ask them whether there will be in the near future, and they said they have a lot planned, so we'll see what happens in the future. They didn't tell me which they were going to hint at, unfortunately, so I can't answer that. But yeah, in terms of a new weapon line as well, that was also asked by one of the people, and they did say that is on the books, and they're after some ideas on how to do that on the forums. So if you guys post there, you can have a chance to do it. Some major class changes. Alright, so in terms of direct class balancing at the time, nothing's going to happen on the initial launch. When the PTS actually launches, they're going to be using these representatives and your feedback to do as much as they can to balance out the skill line. Because obviously when you've got a passive and all of that hitting when the server comes live, that's going to be a huge problem initially. They're going to be trying to balance that as much as possible, and at the same time balancing classes with us. Is there a new material to craft jewelry? Yes. Okay, so how the new jewelry crafting is going to work. The old jewelry is not deconstructible. New jewelry will be, and you'll be able to deconstruct that from materials. But to get the materials, especially gold, I was told is going to be very difficult. I don't know exactly how that works. I did on the server actually find the material. It was the first thing I looked for when I went onto the Summerset server. So it's essentially like anything else. You mine it and it gives you a little dust. And that dust is what you can use to refine, exactly the same as other raw materials, to craft that jewelry and use that to improve. What else have we got here? Other jewelry traits. So other jewelry traits. Ones that we did hear about already is obviously bloodthirsty. A really interesting one that they mentioned was infused. So how infused is going to work is it's going to increase the value of the jewelry enchant itself. I guess we'll see how exactly that's going to perform, because it'll be really interesting with things like Alchemist. So what the Alchemist one does is it lowers the duration of your potion cooldown. And imagine using that on Argonian. This was sort of me theory crafting as I went. What else was there? There was one trait that was not particularly interesting. I think there was a training trait, genuinely. There was one that wasn't particularly good, I think. What else was there? There was one more. I will remember later in the stream. There was another one on there that was pretty good. Generally speaking, there were two that were really interesting. The big thing I would say about those new traits is you have to remember that you're going to be giving up Robust and Magicka for that. So that will affect things a lot. Consider you getting an execute, right? If you lose in the flat damage, that's going to be a big negative impact. Is Acuity going to be nerfed? Ah, well done. Skulls remember the other trait that was pretty good. So there is going to be a tri-stat trait for jewelry. That was the other really good one that they mentioned. I told you I'd remember it. So how the tri-stat jewelry works is exactly the same as a normal enchant. You're basically going to be able to use that as a trait, and you're going to be able to share your trait stuff up so that you can get a balance between health, magicka, and stamina on the jewelry. That's going to be really good. That's going to open a lot of builds up in terms of playstyle. It should be a really nice trait. I will personally probably use that on a lot of builds. Do you know the cost of the time leap? Alright, yeah, I do actually. So we all asked this. There was me and another guy who is crazy, Paolo. There were me and another guy, Zidonize. If you don't know him, check him out. He's a YouTube streamer and his Twitter as well. I don't know if anyone wants to get a link for that from the mods. So we asked them a lot of questions about time stops. So how time stops going to work? It's going to cost initially 100 ult. They are completely open to changing that if they think it's overpowered. However, it's not necessarily going to be that overpowered. So what it's going to do is it's going to take you to the position you were originally at and your original magicka and stamina. It is not going to remove any debuffs on you, and it is not going to be able to res you from the dead. The most interesting place that that's going to be able to be played on will probably be something mobile like a Sorcerer or a Nightblade. However, if you were to run some sort of alt-genning Templar or DK, it could open the chance for mobility. Honestly, I think the cost is alright to start. Again, they did say that when the PTS hits, they are completely open to any suggestions that you make. So, yeah. Any other questions, guys? Keep them coming. The more the merrier. Are there any old set revamping or proc set works? Again, all of that stuff is going to happen at PTS. I did mention that quite in some detail. One thing that I mentioned in particular, so obviously with trait changing also available on jewelry, you've got sets like Fury and 7th Legion that could be very, very overtuned, really heavily overtuned. I did talk to them about that, and they said that very early in the PTS, they're going to be reviewing the sets and looking at whether they need to be adjusted in terms of value because of that trait change. So that will happen. What are all of the Psionic Order abilities? They actually didn't tell us all of them. They did tell some. So the first one is Meditate. So what Meditate will do is when you are out of combat, well, you are allowed to use it in combat, but it's risky. You're going to pause for a sec, a bit like Dark Deal, but a lot longer. And it's going to generate your resources back over time. The thing to remember that is it is attackable during that time. So it's not necessarily going to be overpowered. I think it's going to be something that's going to be easily slotted and deslotted during a fight, and I did mention that to them. But it did sound really interesting. The way it works sounds like a really sort of open Dark Deal. What other abilities were there? There was another really, really interesting one that they mentioned. What was it? There was some sort of debuff. I will remember that one. So, upgrading jewellery, is that just for crafted jewellery, or can I update Blue Moon Dance? You can update every jewellery whatsoever. So a question I'm sure that I'll get about that afterwards is how is that going to affect the gold vendor? That they did say that for the time being they're not going to change the gold vendor, and they're going to look at whether it needs changing afterwards, because obviously it won't be that useful. But keep in mind that that's also going to be a really good source of gold mats if you want to improve other materials. So it is kind of useful. Is there a new trial skin and new weapons? Yep, so there are not new weapons. The way the new trial is going to work is similar to Asylum. So it's going to have 4 bosses. They're all going to be usable similar to Asylum. So you can choose what difficulty 1, 2, 3, 4 or just normal with 1, 2, 3, 4. All sorts of difficulty ranges there. I was not able to get into trial to see healths and all of that. But I did ask about sets. So they said there's no weapons coming, but there will be some 5-piece sets coming with the dungeon. And those will drop differently based on difficulty. So there's going to be an armor with an equivalent thing for perfect for when you get to the lower health. Are there any new style motifs? You know what? I actually don't know. I honestly didn't ask. Are there any obvious nerfs? So when I look across it, given my honest opinion on balance, just in general here, they didn't say anything instantly about any balance changes. What they did say was all of the stuff that I mentioned about the overtuned possibility of Psionic Order skill line, which could easily happen. I asked them about that in quite some detail, and they said, again, like I mentioned, the first week of PTS especially, they're going to take feedback heavily. You really should approach your class representatives, and especially if you join my stream, when you're on that PTS, I'll obviously be on it tons to show you guys all of that. We need to make feedback for them, essentially, because they will pay attention. They did say that they were fully aware that the balance could be a difficulty. What's the new trial called? The new trial is called Cloud's Rest. What else have we got in here? Will this patch make me a god at PvP and trading? As long as you tune in my stream, you're good to go, mate. Can you craft craftable sets for jewellery like Innate, Axiom, or Shackle? Yes. I even believe that it's going to be possible to get house stations for that stuff. Now, on top of that, in terms of the crafting, like I mentioned before, you won't be able to actually deconstruct your current jewellery. You're going to have to use materials that you're going to get then and there. And you'll only be able to craft it when you are owning Summerset. But tradable jewellery will remain tradable. So if I was to make Shacklebreaker jewellery, I could sell that to someone. So in terms of God of Trading, there's another reason why it might make you pretty good at trading, hey? Another thing to mention about that is during the very early stage of the live server, because we'll have tested a lot on the PTS, I would consider it very likely that I am going to get a group of us together to farm some jewellery. There are a few good sources that we've identified to do that, so that we can level up as fast as possible. And then if you are PCU, I will be able to craft you your jewellery, so that should help. Yes, you can transmute jewellery, and that includes with the new traits as well. Long shot, but did you ask if there'll be an alliance change token in the future? Somebody actually did ask that, not myself. They said they could understand a lot of difficulties with balance change. I did point that out. So it was actually Zyden I asked that, I do remember. He asked about it because he thought it would be a good thing as more of a PvE expert. And I mentioned from a PvP perspective the high risk of that. He discussed that with both of us, and I think in the end it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to be honest, I think that's a good thing. Yes, that was another one of the abilities, true. There was one of the abilities that sort of froze the enemy in place. So it was like a CC AoE thing. It sounded really good. I'm trying to remember how that exactly works. Time Stop, that was the name of it. So what that was like, it was like a fear type thing. It was an AoE CC for everybody. The expansion is about 30% bigger than Wardenfell, I would say. What are the Psionic line passives? They weren't open for telling us all. They said that they wanted to keep that a secret for the live server. The one that they did tell us was something about buffing your light attacks in execute range. I did mention how much of a balancing issue that could be, because for PvE that's obviously essential and it could make it sort of pay to win. And they said it was still in the test phase and that could get relooked at and would likely get relooked in the PTS. I didn't see the new skin. I was unable to see that. Are there any new changes to 2H weapons and sets? We weren't open to see the new sets, but something to mention about sets is that in terms of the crafting stations in the new zone, we actually were able to find those, or at least I did. Again, I made that one of my priorities. The crafting stations in that zone, it seemed that they were both Acuity. Now, I don't know if that's because they weren't set yet, or whether they were hiding new sets from us. So I think that might be something we're going to have to see. Are they bringing any new trails as to being able to improve jewelry and normal trails to gold? So I did ask about this in detail, and this is where the sort of stuff about armor comes in. So they're basically trying to release different weapons and armor. That's sort of what they started with Asylum. So Asylum is going to be releasing weapon-based. The new trial will be releasing armors, and that's going to kind of sort of... That's going to try and sort of remove the need as much for jewelry. Well, not obviously remove the need, but remove the balancing issues between not having to farm in trials because of the crafting. What am I looking forward to most? Alright, so I've actually been able to tell you this since day one, and I have. I'm going to hold my hands up and say that there will never be any game more graphically appealing than Summerset. In terms of content, it seemed a fair bit. It's definitely not as much as the base game, but it's more than Wardenfell, I would say. It was a pretty big area, really, really huge to explore with the new dungeons and sort. But graphically, you will not find a place better graphically. It was amazingly pretty. How do you level up the new skill line? So I did ask this as well. Basically, you go to the tower. Now, it seems as far as I could work out that the Psionic order, because I got to the tower itself, I actually tried to find that. You actually need to have done some quests to get into there. And I'm assuming that's sort of to do with the main story. I couldn't progress that far in an hour and a half. I did try. When you get in there, you go into there and you actually level up through quests. So there's basically a quest line related to that tree. And that's how you're going to level that stuff up. Does it come with any server and performance upgrades? People did ask about this. They were a little shut out about their answers to do with server and performance. I think that it's something you should carry on pushing on the forums, because I do think they're going to want to do something about this. I hope there's going to be a clear way to differentiate between the new jewelry and old jewelry. So I have seen this on the forums. I was actually really interested how they're going to do that as well. I can't honestly tell you how they're going to do that. Did you try the new battlegrounds? I didn't actually know there were new battlegrounds, to be honest. Can you review Outcast's article? I'll tell you what, I will open that up and I'll make that what we do after we run out of questions briefly, and we can sort of work through there and see what happens. Not a problem. Are there any house placeable jewelry crafting stations? So I didn't actually ask that, but I'd be almost certain that there were. It seemed like a likelihood, I would say. Somebody else also asked, are there new houses? Yes, I think they said there were 2 new houses coming with the patch. So if you're into that stuff, that's that. I think they even said that one of them was not Crown Store, but don't quote me on that. I don't quite remember. Are there any Warden pet skin changes? No. Did they increase the house furnishing cap? No, but I actually did ask about why it is that. So they said basically they can't actually physically do that. The reason that they can't do that is it's basically... It's a bit of an overload for the server, and you're going to end up with some big lag issues, because when you enter the house, there's obviously so much trying to buffer in that the server's going to crash, and that's why that was the case. With the new skill line, are they all magic-based skills, or are they going to be viable for stamina? Yeah, they're going to be viable for stamina and magicka. They did say that. what did they feed you? It was actually seriously good. So they had sort of these, like, how to describe it, like buffet things, very small snacks. But they had my favorite thing ever, which is, what is he doing? They had my favorite thing ever, which is like, how do you describe it? It's like a cinnamon roll, I think, with icing. It was pretty good food, I'm not going to lie. I ate a lot. No, they have not nerfed Warden, unfortunately. I will cover the stuff in Outcast's article very, very shortly. So there was no mention about server. We did ask about it. They were a little closed off about it. Something else they're going to do, we sort of asked them about this, is they're considering opening like a feedback area for people separate in the forum, more specifically to figures that are going to know about it. It's something we asked them whether they'd be interested in doing to try and get things to work better. I'm just going to let these guys kill me. It's too annoying. So I'm going to quickly read through Outcast's article real fast. So one thing it says is that two-handed weapons will now count as a double set piece. This is going to be an incredibly major change because this is going to open 5-piece sets in a lot of places where you otherwise wouldn't get it. It's going to be particularly good for yours truly because that's going to be very powerful. Cinnamon Swirl, that's the one. In terms of set changes, Night Mother and Thunderflame are now going to apply Major Fracture instead of individual penetration bonuses, so that's going to change the way that plays. It's going to be really interesting how that two-handed stuff plays, because I'm going to wonder how that's going to make Magicka viable on Dueled. Because imagine being someone like me, that's going to open so many options for 5-piece sets. It's really good actually for Magicka guys especially, it's quite nice. Here we go, I found the rest of the traits. So Harmony is another one, that's going to increase the effectiveness of synergies. Triune is the tri-stat obviously. Unknown is going to give physical resistance, and Swift was speed. That is still going to be influenced by the way the speed cap in the game works. So just keep that in mind. In terms of class balances, there are some changes there. So Combustion passive, every time you apply burning or poison, you're going to gain 500 magic or stamina with a 5-second cooldown. That is humongous sustain for Magic Decay. That is going to open so many options for damage. That's a huge change. A good buff for Magic Decay. We'll see how that changes for Stam Decay, which is pretty damn strong. So I hope they'll have a quick relook at that slightly. Cauterize has a bigger radius now, which is great news for me, because obviously I'm running that. Reflective Plate. I want you guys to get a Pog Jump ready in the chat, because this is where the initial changes to snare removal are going to be applied. Reflective Plate. This is the other morph of Wings. So one morph of Wings does more damage. The other one currently is fairly useless. It gives a minor physical resistance buff. Brace for impact. Pog Jabs in the chat. The other morph of Scales will now remove all snares from you. Oh yes, you heard me right. It's going to remove all snares from your character. Fragmented Shield. The major mending duration on that has been put a little higher to make that a little more useful for your healing. It will be interesting because at the moment it's pretty much not used. It's going to open the use of that quite a bit more, which is good to see. And then Cinderstorm is going to heal instead of dealing damage. So it's going to help Magic Decay's healing issues. We'll see how that actually performs. Then we're going to work down the Sork skill. So Conjured Ward will now give 10% increased max shields. It's going to be interesting how that balances out. I found out how that balances out. So Hardened Ward is now going to give 20% increased max shield. But obviously Conjured Ward will balance with that out. However, Conjured Ward is going to help you stack bigger harnesses and dampens. This is actually a Sork survival buff. Again, guys, keep in mind that all of this stuff is going to be relooked at as you go in terms of the PTS. There is a very, very risky change to mines. I don't understand this change, so I really hope this gets relooked at. They're going to reduce the cost of mines by 1,000 Magicka. That seems a bit too strong in my opinion, so I hope that gets changed. Lightning Flood is going to deal 50% more damage. I believe that is to help bring the DPS a bit more in line with Magicka Nightblade. Again, we'll see how that works. And here's a big one. Bound Aegis is now not a toggle. So when you activate it, it's going to increase your block mitigation by 20%. So the reason that this is there is it's to help bring other classes into a line where they can actually be a tank. Because at the moment, if you go to PvE, only a DK is viable for that. It's going to be more useful for Sorks. I can think of so many interesting ways to use that with a Frost Staff for Magicka Sork. Could you imagine the opportunities? So many good ways there. So that'd be really interesting. Nightblade. So Dark Cloak is now just going to heal you for 33% of your max health. That is insane. So this is going to give Nightblades a class heal. That is humongous. 33% of your max health as a heal. So now Nightblade has a heal. I don't honestly know if that still has Cloak. But if not, we might not have to run a Resto Staff, which is going to be glorious, because we're going to stack a high health build. Remember that that's battle scaled, guys. So although it's 33% of your health, let's imagine that you've got 30k health. That's going to be a 10k heal, but that's only 5 in PvP. So keep in mind that for stand builds, that's not going to be overpowered. It's going to be a buff for Magicka Nightblades. Imagine a stand blade. Stand blade only has probably 20k health. So take that down, that's about a 6k heal. It's only going to heal for about 3k with battle scaling for a stand blade. For a Mage Blade, it's going to open a lot of really cool opportunities up. So I don't think that really is going to change anything for Mage Blade. Personally, it's a stand blade. I think personally on a stand blade, I would still be using the stamina the crit morph. What else have we got? Strife. So Strife is going to be increased in cost. That's obviously funnel health. That's going to be increased in cost in line with Force Pulse. Interesting to see how that plays out. That's actually really good for me personally, because I don't use that. I play a melee blade, so I'm only getting buffed on my Magicka Blade here. Let's move on to Templar. So Templar at the moment's biggest issue is it struggles in PvE. PvP, it's pretty strong. So they have increased the damage of puncturing strikes and the healing received by about 5%. So this is going to help Magicka Templars have a bit more damage in PvE, and it's going to help them have a bit more of an offensive window in PvP. So on Templar, I am extremely strong on it, but it can be difficult to get kills. Dark Flare, this is going to be a really good one. I like this change a lot, actually. So when you use Dark Flare, it's now going to apply the debuff even if dodged. It won't do the damage, but it will put the debuffs on, which obviously includes major... what's it called? I'll remember what it is in a sec. I'll get there. Major Defile. So that's going to be really good for helping sort of balance out stam classes, which are overperforming at the moment quite a lot in terms of survivability against classes with lack of burst damage. Templar included here. Honor the Dead has got a bit of a buff, so they're going to reduce the cooldown of that Magicka back to from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. So how Honor the Dead works is when you cast Breath of Life, you get your heal, and some of that Magicka comes back it comes back over time, over 6 seconds. Now, this is a really good change because it's going to help solo Templars perform, and it's not going to buff Zergs at all. Because for a Zerg, you're going to be running Breath of Life. As a solo Templar, it can be very punishing to sustain your Magicka in scenarios like that. So it's going to be a really good help for those. Healing Ritual is completely changed. It's now an instant cast. So Healing Ritual is the other morph where you basically do a little channel and get a heal. They've now made that an instant cast, and the cost is increased a lot. So this is going to be another form of burst heal. I don't know anything else about that. Nothing else too important there. So warding, the cost of Shimmering Shield has been increased. Thank God Almighty. There are, like I said, a lot of stuff on Warden that will be reconsidered in terms of the PTS when that hits live. So they will look at that heavily. What else have we got? Empower has been reworked completely. So Empower is getting changed so that instead of 20% damage buff, you're going to get 40% more damage on your next light attack. That obviously sounds rubbish. Now, keep in mind that that's actually good for PvE to a point, because a lot of the time when you're doing PvE, you're going to empower light attack cast. It's really good for PvE. And in terms of PvP, the only thing that that's really nerfing is a gank, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be going for that instant burst and empowering beforehand. This is a really good balance change in terms of PvP to stop people insta-killing with no effort. Instead, what this is going to do is it's going to mean that Empower is more useful in a normal build, where, for instance, if I incap, I'm going to go incap, light attack, surprise attack. So it's going to help my burst in rotation, and it's going to be true for other classes as well with their Empowers. So let's go through Sigic's skill line in a bit more detail. So I've obviously covered Undo, I've covered Meditate as well. In terms of the morphs, one morph gives more resources per second, and the other morph's going to give you major protection. We'll see how they perform in PvP. I will definitely be giving this skill a try, especially if you can move it on and off. The one thing to remember is you can't move. It's not interruptible, but you can't move. So you're going to be stationary while that's there. Oh my god, you're right. That could be a 40% increase to Overload. Oh, imagine if that happens, that light attack buff. Jeez, if that does. So time stop I did mention before, it's basically an AoE CC, so it has a delay on it, and after 1.5 seconds, any target in the area is frozen for 3 seconds. If they manage to get out of the area, you're safe, but otherwise it's a stun and you have to CC break that. So it's going to open the chance to have a stun. It will also go through blocks, so it's going to work similarly to a fear. Imbue weapons is next, so this is going to increase, so it's going to apply a buff that adds extra physical damage to your next light attacks for 2 seconds, and one will buff Magicka and add a status effect, and the other will heal the caster for 15% of damage done. I'm assuming that's on the light attacks. Again, it will be really interesting to see how that is going to work. I don't think that one's that strong, so I think that'll be alright. Acceleration, so is a skill that is instant cast Magicka to give you 3 seconds of Mage Expedition and 12 seconds of Minor Fourth. If you don't know what that is, that's 50% extra damage to your crit damage. That's quite a cool buff to help some builds be a bit more viable. I like that actually a lot. One of the morphs is really strong. I love this a lot. This is a super underestimated buff. It's going to reduce the cost of sprint by 50% for 12 seconds. You have to gain an understanding of how good that is for mobility. Sprint is expensive. It's really going to help the viability of a lot of things there. So it is a really, really good change. The other morph is going to triple the duration. So you're going to get a lot more minor force increased damage time. It's going to make that very, very strong buff still, but you're not going to get that speed. One final one is going to make light attacks heal group members. Well, I don't know about anyone else, but I am very ready for my overload build buff. And then the final one is a passive, which is going to gain a shield while blocking, which recharges after you block. So this is damage shield. We will see how these passives perform. The passives are something that I am deeply concerned about, because obviously you'll need to have the skill line, and it could become fairly pay to win. None of the skill lines sound that. We will see how that stuff gets balanced. I really hope they take the feedback heavily into account. That's my only concern, the passives. I think that covers pretty much everything. So, any more questions, guys? Do we have any more questions about the stuff? I see some more coming in. Were there any changes to anything for Sorc, preferably Stam? I did cover those, Doug, so they will be on the video. I covered all of the Sorc changes. Stamplar, well, to be honest, I don't think Stamplar needs any buffs. I hope that they relook again in the PTS. That's where the vast majority of buffs and adjustments will be made. I hope that they look into balancing out Power the Light, so it only takes casters damage, but they obviously have to take into account how that will affect PvE. No, Skander, I don't know what world you live in, mate. So, in terms of the Nightblade Cloak heal, that's not going to be overpowered for stamina. That's not going to be that strong at all on stamina, because there's so few stamina that stack a lot of health. It's going to be rubbish, and you're not going to be able to cast it that much. It's only going to be healing for like 3k. There are currently no Defile or Befoul changes. I, however, did put that forward to them when I was at the server. That was only about 3 days before this test that Outcast did, so it's extremely likely that that will be considered in the future on the PTS. I don't know how you think a 3k heal is good. I can't deconstruct rings that I collect right now. Correct. So you can't deconstruct them, but you can transmute them, and you will be able to research them. Were there any battleground changes? Not currently, I'm afraid. What's your outlook on PvE and PvP respectively? I think PvP is going to get a good balance change here. I hope that they take the class stuff seriously. I think in terms of PvP, it's really nice for balance. My big two concerns are going to be how the Psionic Order balances out, and how the two-handed weapon count in those 2 slots is going to balance out. So we'll see how that works. It's just going to be interesting because it's going to open a lot of very powerful combos. I can already theorycraft a lot of those in my head, so we'll see how that actually performs. It's going to stop you have to do things like front bar, back bar. So for instance, I could run Shackle Breaker on here and still run another 5-piece on the armor. So yeah, there's a few things will change in terms of that. We'll see how it works. The changes, so these are changes that I actually experienced when I was at Bethesda, and also some are from Outcast's website. There's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so I think that high health Magicka builds could be a really interesting approach to the game again. We'll see how it changes heavy, because damage is really interesting. Will the DK wings also remove roots or just snares? Now, it did just say snares. It is very possible it will remove roots, because Shuffle does and Forward Momentum does. I think the game reads roots fairly like a snare, so I would consider it likely that it removes roots. Now, keep in mind with that snare removal, as fantastic as that is, they can be reapplied afterwards. It's still a really good skill. It's going to open a lot more mobility for the one class that has no chance moving. It will be really interesting. It will be really, really nice. I will definitely be running that Morph of Wings, no question. For jewelry crafting, are the mats farmable through nodes or mob drops? Actually, both, I believe. They are definitely farmable through nodes. I did find those. They're very obvious. So it's going to be like a silver ore on the floor. It sort of looks like, the best way I could describe is half a bubble on the floor. You're going to mine that and you'll get given some dust. You can then refine that and you'll get the materials from that. How is that going to work for Master and Maelstrom weapons? They will be unaffected. So Master and Maelstrom weapons already are a one-piece set buff. It won't change anything on those. Isn't that a huge nerf to Asylum and Maelstrom? To a point, but in the end you've got to remember that Asylum and Maelstrom weapons are their own set. So they're still not going to become irrelevant from that. Let's imagine that you're running one-hand shield two-hander. So on one-hand shield two-hander, you're going to have a 5-piece here, 2 Bloodspawn, 5-piece on here. You have to consider, do I want that extra resources back or whatever from the Master, Maelstrom, etc. on the two-hander, or do I want to maintain this 5-piece? And for most 5-pieces that you'd run a set like that, it can already 1 bar, so those sets are still going to be usable. Definitely viable still, so that it will still be okay. Best race for Stamborn, it's going to be a Red Guard or an Orc. I would go Red Guard. Were there any changes to Maelstrom Arena? No. So here's a really interesting thing. I know a lot of you guys are Trial fans. So Maelstrom's not going to receive any changes. I did, however, put the suggestion that they make a hard mode for people interested in a real challenge. What I also talked about in quite some detail with them, because this was just a suggestion, and they did discuss, was whether they plan on bringing trials out with a different structure. They did say to me clearly that they don't have intentions of bringing any more solo trials anytime soon because it is a group trial. They did, however, say that it was on the books of consideration to bring a 2-man trial. So that will be really, really good for people who want to play with their friends. It maintains the group play element, but is going to open that chance to have a bit more of an interesting experience rather than that 12-man trial, and also make it less easy to get a group. Any other questions, boys, or are we done here? Do anybody else have any questions whatsoever? It might be I've already covered it. I will upload all of this to YouTube once we've covered everything, but this is your chance. Again, make sure you tag me. That's the best bit. I'm trying to think of what other things I asked them while I was there specifically. I don't think there was anything too crazy that I asked. Will they bring dueling arenas? It was not something that anybody discussed. When will the PTS arrive? That's actually on the forums. That actually is a good point, Decimus. So the one thing that's going to be nice about Dark Cloak is it's going to allow you to heal while you are marked, rather than being screwed as a Nightblade. Were there any cost poison changes? I did say that I would like that. They didn't say anything straight away. So, yeah. Complain about as much kind of PTS. Again, I can't highlight enough that the PTS, they are seriously taking into account views of the players, so really pummel in advice on the PTS them. If you think something is clearly out of whack, put it in, because the more they hear about it, the more likely it is to be changed. Yes, champion points will go up. Were there any crate reward information? No, but that reminds me of something. There was some new reward system, wasn't there? Yeah, so there's some new reward system. I don't entirely know how it works. I heard about something to do with like a daily login reward, something small. Just a nice way to reward active players. A lot of people will see negatives of things with that. There's not really any negative to that, because what that's going to do is it's going to promote people to play more actively, and that's literally it. They're not, in any light soon, going to increase the gear cap of CP. I didn't hear anything about that from them. I think that they are aware of how bad that will affect the balance. Did they say why they changed Night Mother and Sunder Flame to Major Fracture, since that heavily nerfs them for trials? Well, I would assume, I don't know why they did, but I would assume that is to help balance it in terms of stamina. Because obviously stamina generally has far higher DPS for most classes than Magicka, and it's going to help bring that a bit more in line. Thing is, you can stack a lot of penetration. No, there were no changes intended for bow yet. I actually joked about that as well after I asked. I joked that that was the first time I've ever seen a patch where bow didn't get a buff. But there were no changes predicted for bow. Will you need to have traits learned in order to craft the jewellery? Yes. So you're going to need crafts in jewellery learned. They are also going to bring a jewellery research scroll similar to the others in the RIT voucher. So if anyone wants to stock up on those, probably a good advice for you. I would strongly advise doing that. And I will be doing some streams at the very start of the patch to try and level up jewelry crafting as fast as possible for theory crafting. Anybody who does help me in that, I will craft you free of charge. Not a problem. So if you do help me get there, I will help a lot for you. Yeah. A new class... Well, I'll leave that. Did they say something about a new weapon skill line? I did ask about this. Yeah. So they sort of mentioned that it was in the books that they were considering. My biggest guess, and it is only that because they didn't want to say too much about it, is that a new weapon skill line could be a possibility for the next expansion. So we're probably talking a year, but that is obviously a new layer of customization that could help. It was something they admitted they were considering, and yeah, that's a good thing. Did you notice on the tri-stat if it had more total stats? Yes, it will be like the other one, so it's going to work exactly the same as the glyph. I didn't actually get to see it, but they did honestly say that it's going to work exactly the same as the glyph, so it should, yes. What are the new ways to get skill points? There's going to be a quest line. There's also going to be another tutorial. The tutorial, by the way, is really beautiful. It's not very long. Probably some of the best graphics the game has. Best similarity I could give is probably Spellscar, like when you actually go in the quest zone. Really, really nice there. And in terms of... What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. Someone remind me what I was saying and I'll cover that again. Yeah, so the jewelry will be able to be deconstructed, but not the ones in the current patch. So if you already own jewelry, that is not deconstructible to save that overperforming and being farmable. Are they bringing in any kind of queue system for trials where people could just queue for a group? We did actually say about the difficulty of queuing for trials. They did sort of mention that they were trying to find ways around that. So again, when that PTS hits, I would suggest talking about that. They didn't actually say that it's something they've already made or prepared. But if you suggest it, I'm sure they will get that going, because it can't be that hard to make. Will jewelry have its own crafting writs? I didn't actually ask about that, but I would probably consider it a likelihood, since they did mention there will be writ vouchers for it. I would assume there will be. I don't remember when the PTS was. That is on the forum somewhere, so I'm sure someone could get a command for that. Can jewelry quality be improved by crafting, or is it like enchanted glyphs? So, you know what? I actually don't know. That's a really good question. I don't honestly know. They mentioned that it was going to be harder, so I would actually wonder if it's going to be like enchanting. I truly can't answer that. I didn't think about asking that. It's a brilliant question. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. It's a really good question, mate. So for jewelry, when you refine the resource, does that give the upgrade mats as well as, or are the upgrade mats farmed in another way? It is to do with the raw resource. You can also deconstruct to get them. Was there a change to that, Bobby? I don't believe so. Was there any news on spell crafting? We did actually mention this as well in when we had the QA with the devs. They said that it is something they still want to implement, but they have kind of put it on a small back burner and they haven't really found a way to implement that yet. It is still being developed by a few people, so it's not like it's gone. And they do want to implement it, but whether it actually does, who knows? We'll see. I hope it does. It's really good. But yeah, I mean, they did mention that their biggest concern with it is obviously balance issues, which is dead right. It could be a disaster. It could be really good. So they mentioned that. You get a daily reward for playing Battlegrounds. I actually didn't know that. There you go. Any last questions, guys? Where do you see the info on the skills? So, for those of you who do want to see anything that I've mentioned, I will upload this on YouTube afterwards. You'll be able to see everything that I've chatted about there. You can also check out Outcast's website. He's got a full detail there as well. But probably the best bet is to go from my video. I will go in a lot of detail. I have gone in a lot of detail for everything I could possibly answer. I've covered everything on his website and more. So watch that and you will get every piece of info you'd ever like. Spellcrafting is basically a concept that there's going to be runic tunnels and you can enter there and unlock like a rune, and you can combine stuff together to make new skill lines. But yeah, I won't be able to say the overload sort yet. We'll see. I mean, when the patch actually hits, I'll do a lot of theory crafting to do with the class itself. Sorry, each of the classes themselves, and see what sort of concepts we can come up with. Because in general, it looks like there's going to be a lot of big changes for theory crafting perspective. Off topic here, I'm going to ride down to Philastrus and take that. No, a slider weapon still will be useful. So the thing is, two-hander weapons are going to count as 2 slots, for those who didn't hear about that. So that would mean, for instance, if I had 3 shackle breaker and a two-hander, I would actually get the 5-piece rather than just the 4-piece. And that's going to open a few more builds for Magic players especially. Also for bow and two-handed players and things like that. However, on stamina, you've already got a lot of concepts that are so good. So for instance, I would never drop a master bow. You said there were no battleground changes, but were there any questions people asked that had good answers about future changes? Oh, so many. Let me work through a few. So we did mention about changes to the way alliance queuing happens. I know Shay asked me to ask this and a few others. So I did mention that to try and stop morning capping, to put a dynamic queue system in. They said it was actually a really good idea, and they definitely put that forward to the devs. So I hope that that will come in. That's going to stop scenarios where, I'll be able to give you a really good example right now, I imagine. Where we go on a campaign, like, so for Sil, it's only 2-1-1 right now, and you find it like locked 1-1. So that should be a really, really good change for balancing out Cyrodiil. Obviously, I mentioned that there's the two-man trial that they're looking at bringing. This guy's going to die. All of this info. So I went to the actual dev and asked so many questions. Now, there were actually some questions that I will put in the video that I don't know if the people are here for, because I was asked on the Discord. So a few questions to cover that I asked them more about quality of life of the game was how they're going to deal with the bot situation. They did say they're working on new systems for that. They didn't give me an ETA, so that's as much as I can say there. Quickly open up my Discord. I'm reading some of these. What else did we have? I know Nepeti asked a few. What else have we got? Will animation cancelling ever be changed? They said they like the way it works. Personally, I do as well. I'm going to be honest with you. There was no change to gap closes. They obviously mentioned that they nerfed the duration damage from the gap close, but that was pretty much it there. This was a big one. So this was one that I asked myself. Now, what I mentioned to them before was like why they always delay changes for bugs and small quality of life changes. Now, they actually mentioned why that is. Any of you PC plebs, be ready to blame the console plebs. So essentially what happens is when they make a change, it has to get certified by the console. So let's imagine you're a PS4 player. I, as the developer, have made a change that may not meet PlayStation's legal rules. That is why they can't instantly do developments for a major issue unless it's truly so major that it has to be dealt with, and then they'll get fast track it as much as they can. Is because the console has to have it reviewed over a couple of weeks. And that is why they generally try and push all their upgrades into one patch at the same time. So they did mention that they're going to try and up the amount that they do in each of the quarterly things, but that they can't actually do it little incrementals. I can sort of understand that, but at the same time, it obviously is frustrating. It is literally down to console, so blame console basically. In terms of new content for PvP, now this is where you are going to have to help me basically. So I did ask about PvP. Some of you are not going to like this answer. If you hear me out, you'll actually like it a lot because it's going to get a good review. I asked them if there's any changes planned for PvP. They said not currently, no. But they also said that if I have any ideas, they do want to improve PvP and that they'd like the ideas to come to it. So what I will be working on is I'm going to be working on a document that's going to help make a development list for PvP to help reactivate PvP as a place with as little change as possible. So things like bringing in a bounty system where it might assign you a random player is a change I've talked about all the time. Random chest spawns that are marked on the map that only one person could loot that has a slow duration to generate fighting in other areas. So for instance, a crate might drop here. Who the hell is going to be there? But people would be alerted to that and they could move to it on the map and they could try and take that. But at the same time, people will fight them for it and only one person could loot it. That way it's going to cut it down for Zergs. Same is true for IC, etc. The only way we are ever going to get that to work is for you guys to help me. So what I need you people to do is type !Discord, follow the stream, follow my YouTube, most importantly the Discord and the stream. When you get into my Discord, we have a section called Game Development Ideas, or Game Improvements I think it's called. Go into there and put your suggestions in a polite, orderly, civil way. I will log them. I'll probably even do a stream when we get that suggestion. It might even be this week's community event, and we will work together to get as many ideas as possible sorted so that we can make these changes and get things working, all right? So it is something they want to do, they just don't know how. I think their problem is they don't have that many PvP devs. I'm essentially going to dev for them. So get onto the Discord, get in stream, either is fine, and interact with me. That is your best bet to help it. please jump on that Discord and drop your advice, because I have a lot of ideas. Do I have enough ideas to make them all? Of course not. We need a group effort on that. This guy's a very good player. This will be a tough fight. Can you repeat what they're going to do about bot trains? So again, I did mention this. They said they're currently working on some system upgrades to try and improve the way bots work. They said they can't promise anything, because they said, sort of semi-jokingly, that in the end, they're going to develop new bots as fast as they develop systems to counteract it, which obviously makes sense, right? That's kind of just, it's technology versus technology. It's like the whole hacking world. When people are master hackers, how do they do that? Well, they get hackers to hack themselves, so it's a similar thing. Next double XP, I believe, will be on the 4th, so tomorrow. Good fight, dude. Can you craft necro jewelry? So you won't be able to craft necro jewelry, but you will be able to improve it. So farmed sets are still going to remain farmed sets, but you're going to be able to craft a blue one into a gold one, for instance. I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Are there any other questions, or should we call it for questions at that point and focus on the PvP? Do anybody else have any other ideas that they would like asked? There's no nerfs planned for Piercing Mark that I saw, but again, I can't advise enough. Get onto PTS. PTS will help you a lot. I think we've covered most questions here. Now, there's still another wall coming in. Ask as much as you like, guys. Will there be any change to the power of an enchant with the quality of your jewellery, or will that still affect? It will be changed, yes. So your enchant and things like that, the quality of your trait, that's all obviously going to be influenced by the quality, naturally. So yes, that will be affected. The PTS is announced on the forum somewhere. I can't remember the exact date. Will you see what? Oh, sorry. Who do you see as the early winners and lunars to the balancing change? It's a really nice change for Magic Decay, actually. Magic Decay is going to get a really good buff, which it needs. The Psionic Order is going to be my biggest balance issue. I really hope that they're careful with the passives in there. I really, really hope. Will Fenris be satisfied? I suppose so. Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of customization. Yes, you can make gold rings. Yes, I will post all of the video. 21st of April is the PTS, for those of you asking. I finally got a confirmation of that. Thank you, Chipso. What changes are gonna affect your Nightblade build the most, and why? Cloak being able to heal is a huge change for me, because it might mean I'll be able to drop a Restoration Staff, and that is going to open the chance to go Destro and Two-Hander, which is massive. We'll see if I actually choose to do that. But yeah, we'll see. Any other final questions? Change the Sorcerer and Implosion passive, I don't know about that. Again, so let me sort of summarize everything here. I have gone over pretty much everything. Yes, there'll be trait change and all of that. If you didn't catch all the info, best bet is to check out my YouTube. I will upload everything that we've covered so far. I will do that. I really, really advise you to keep those suggestions coming. And when the PTS hits, suggest as much as you can to them on the PTS, because that's going to be really important for getting the initial feedback. I can't do that myself. Now, before everybody leaves, I'm hoping you want to stay anyway and watch